The date is the 19th of the 3rd, 2023. It's Dr. Richard McLean, and I'm making this statement to the Commonwealth Ombudsman and the Federal Circuit Court of Australia to support my public interest disclosure. It's my request that all these videos are looked at in their totality and all acknowledged. I had the pleasure of meeting Tony Riddle, returned SAS soldier, and I need political protection because Tony and I are both scapegoats. He's a returned SAS soldier, was in the Black Hawk helicopter crash, and one of only 3 with his security clearance in the country for counter-terrorism. Here, following, he details exactly the psychometric profiling that he has witnessed the federal government do to victimise persons of interest. And he details how they are, quote-unquote, sacrificed, i.e. killed, by a methodology that is pervasive and a catastrophic character assassination and a perverse kind of victimisation. He justifies this in the conversation that we had that's presented as evidence below, and how it's possible for an individual like me to suffer so much detriment, financial abuse, vilification, identification, victimisation, and literal torture. That evidence is presented below. I was invited to make a public interest disclosure to the Commonwealth Ombudsman, and I have. And they've finally acknowledged me. And they're going to get back to me by Friday, the 24th of March 2023. But prior to them getting back to me, I'm making this statement today, and I'm making some demands. They protect me and my welfare, and I detail those below. I then name public officials of disclosable conduct. I want this document and this video to be used in my evidence to support my public interest disclosure complaint to the Commonwealth Ombudsman and also to the Federal Circuit Court. They have till next Tuesday, 21st, to acknowledge me within the official 14 days. First up, this is the reason I need protection. I wish to admit that under financial control and family violence, I committed Centrelink fraud from 2010 to 2015 because my partner, then former Apple employee and then ASIC employee Steve Icinides, insisted on me receiving the disability pension, although he was earning $30,000 to $40,000 a month, first at Apple and then at ASIC, the Secret Service. In addition, I have evidence presented here that he actually was claiming a carer's pension just to extort the last bit of money to feather his own nest with a carer's payment for Centrelink. Neither Centrelink, the Tax Office, the Office of Prime Minister and Cabinet, or ASIC or APRA will acknowledge that that relationship ever existed. This protection is necessary for me to avoid my further persecution financially when all along I was under the auspice of provable financial control. Therefore, I demand whistleblower protections so that I'm not treated unfairly and victimised further because of this fraud that I committed that occurred under the auspice of family violence. That family violence and coercive financial control is still continuing because Steve Icinides refuses to yield on the just, equal, fair settlement that he owes me after exploiting me for 5 years for my disability payout and my nest egg, and how he used me and spat me out and left me homeless. This family violence and abuse is elongated and emboldened by many government departments and statutory authorities, even up to and including the Office of Prime Minister and Cabinet, who refuse my freedom of information when they at first acknowledged that there were thousands of matches, and then they just did a total backflip and rejected it. This would have easily revealed the relationship with the then ASIO agent, Steve Icinides, and the government will not admit that this relationship ever existed and therefore is a block to my financial prosperity and elongates the family violence for which he has total control over my life. That is disclosable conduct of all those agencies and Steve Icinides. I also committed fraud with the NDIS. I invoiced intentionally from a supposed carer called Steve Icinides with an E for life coaching, and this was in order to get money out of my own NDIS plan. It was literally the only way I could survive under the guise of having my prosperity and finances intelligently and maliciously redacted from me, systemically and universally, in a conscious and malicious and intentional way that had an aim to make me broke and cause me harm. What is happening here, and why my public interest disclosure has merit, is that there is a clear conspiracy to pervert the course of justice. It's underpinned by powerful key political stakeholders. It identifies me as crazy, vilifies me and victimises me, and has universally exploited me, which was the causation of my suicide attempt in February 2021. It's also responsible for my immense pain and suffering and poverty and homelessness and me living under the poverty line for years on end. This is all disclosable conduct for those public officials who are refusing to acknowledge the relationship that I had and who further cover up any way of me getting prosperity or justice. The Charter of Human Rights of a person with a disability is a fundamental document that underpins all laws in this country. It is not being upheld. It states that a person with a disability, such as myself, should not be discriminated against, should not be exploited, should not have their property redacted from them, and that includes money, should not have the sanctity of life removed, and not be tortured. It also says they're not to be experimented on, and also states a person with a disability should have equality before the law and access to the law at all times, and this has never been more false for me. Despite the enormous amount of grievances amongst political persecution below, which would demand compensation, settlements, insurances, royalties, and other detriment payments, my lawyer, John Boyle, has witnessed me become incarcerated, live in poverty, starve, the entirety of my worldly possessions destroyed, and me become homeless without enough to eat, and he still did not follow my instructions to demand settlements. In the entire about 6 months of me engaging his professional services, he has billed me about $30,000 and another cost agreement of $210,000 for the family law issue with Steve Icinides, whilst overseeing my personal destruction, hunger, incarceration, being beaten up, run over by a car, and victimised to such a profound degree one would think it would be stupid to think that this vile oppression of me would not at some point drive me to suicide again. And that is why I believe that people are all in this together and they are acting with impunity in order to advance and elongate my financial suffering and put me at great risk of killing myself. I wish to say right up the front of this that the Attorney General, Mark Dreyfus, won't respond to me, and I've provided evidence of his office rejecting me, just as Michaelia Cash did before in the last government. He's a person who oversees various statutory agencies such as AFCA, the Australian Human Rights Commission, Comcare, the Ombudsman, and others. And that's why I feel that my public interest disclosure with the Commonwealth Ombudsman is doomed to fail. And it is why I have put so much effort into defending my life and my very existence. Because without food, without medicine, without shelter, I'm going to die. And it is unbelievable that this is happening to me. I've also provided evidence that on the 4th of the 8th, 2022, I made a video whistleblower statement. And following that, when I said I was at risk, that I was under threat, and that I had already made public interest disclosures to various agencies, the police violently kicked in my door, handcuffed me, and took me to a psychiatric ward where I was imprisoned for 2 months. While I was there, the hospital, the police, and the community care team at Saltwater Clinic, and everyone I know, oversaw the landlord, Hung Ho of Edithvale's, destruction of everything I own in that house, and the entirety of my worldly goods were taken to the tip. What is profoundly evident is that I've been asking for help for a long time, and I knew that I was at risk, and I warned people that I was at risk by the very people that are supposed to be helping me and protecting me in the community and protecting my goods and protecting my welfare. I wish to say right up front that I'm banned from AFCA, causing massive financial detriment. It is unconscionable that a member of the Australian public cannot access a federal statutory authority. Tim Goss was the man who was pivotal in delaying, denying and deferring my just compensations and settlements, leading to my financial distress, even after I had attempted suicide and then survived. He is well aware of my finances because I let AFCA know back in 2018 that I was under financial distress when I approached them for help. And due to their own literature, a financially marginalised person is supposed to have their determinations concluded within 4 weeks at an ombudsman. Mine excruciatingly took over 1.5 years and never came to anything, and it was elongated and deferred, and it had an intention. And that intention was to redact prosperity from me, and it acted outside of their own mechanisms by which AFCA is supposed to work. And I have provided the evidence of Tim Goss absolutely gaslighting me in a bizarre kind of victimisation that only I could suffer personally and on my own. That is disclosable conduct. Tim Goss from AFCA and the statutory authority boss that oversees AFCA. I wish to say that I lost about a potential $1.5 million at the Australian Human Rights Commission. It was a totally non-impartial decision by Liz Linsberg, and I present that evidence below, and Liz Linsberg is a person of disclosable conduct in the Australian government. I've provided the moment I lost a potential $1.5 million in a detriment for a total permanent disability and income assist protection from Australian Super and TAL underwriters. It's an insurance I could have used now with an acquired brain injury. I'm aware that it's explicitly the Australian government financially oppressing me in ever so clever ways, because in actual fact I approached TAL personally and directly, and they offered me a settlement of $50,000, which went on my many bills from borrowing money from people in order to survive. That is disclosable conduct. Also disclosable conduct is when the CDDC scheme, which is a scheme that is supposed to compensate people for the misadministration of government agencies, I applied many times, and Finance Minister Birmingham rejected my CDD scheme compensations. That is disclosable conduct of an Australian public official. Like I've been saying, my former partner, Steve Isonides, who exploited me for my nest egg and left me homeless, and then further coercively financially controlled me for years and was instrumental in getting me oppressed and vilified and locked up in a hospital, owes me a fair, equal, legal settlement. Not even John Boyle, my lawyer, will act in that space because he's gutless, but also because it's not that there's lack of evidence, it's that they're saying I need leave from the court. It is abundantly clear that I have a disability and I was under financial duress and family violence in order to get that leave from the court. There is no doubt the relationship existed, and here I am giving him the engagement ring in 2011. Disclosable conduct. Steve Isonides, public official at ASIO. It is not okay that the following things have happened to me and occurred to me. It details the names of various public servants or their organisations who are complicit in disclosable conduct for the purposes of a public interest disclosure and my vile victimisation. First off the rank is the Office of Prime Minister and Cabinet, who refused my freedom of information in conjunction with the Office of the Australian Information Commissioner and others. That would have easily revealed the detriment in the many statutory agencies and my former partner who exploited me and owes me a settlement. Mark Dreyfus and his staff intentionally avoid me and refuse to acknowledge me. I'm a member of the public and I deserve access to statutory agencies and government officials. You can't just gaslight someone out of existence, which is what they are doing. Mark Dreyfus, disclosable conduct. Deborah Glass never acknowledges my concerns at the Victorian Ombudsman. Disclosable conduct. Deborah Glass. I can't believe I'm banned at AFCA for threatening to expose the truth and being set up by Tim Goss and others that I'll lose over $2 million potential dollars in detriment for just threatening to tell the truth. Liz Lindsberg of the Australian Human Rights Commission free-kicked a potential $1.5 million settlement that caused me detriment to the opposition. Shameful public disclosure there. And we go right up to the head of ASIO. David Irvine was the head of ASIO and Steve's boss at the time he worked there. He was aware that I was on a pension and he was aware that all the money was being channeled to Steve whilst I was being exploited. That is disclosable conduct. Head of ASIO, David Irvine. The head of WorkSafe needs to be stitched up. I'm banned there. Banned from WorkSafe for getting irate on the phone after I've been abused by them so much. Disgraceful effort. Disclosable conduct. Head of WorkSafe. Disclosable conduct. Paul Fowler. He was the old boss at WorkSafe and now he works for Comcare. It was WorkSafe who forced me to go over to Comcare with my workers' compensation claim, and then Paul Fowler rejected me at Comcare. That's called corruption. Paul Fowler, disclosable conduct. How awful of you to do that to me, mate. That is despite my contract being with a Victorian statutory authority and I was only legislated to work inside Victoria and therefore my insurance is at WorkSafe. How do I get my work cover if I'm banned from WorkSafe? This is disclosable conduct. It's financially abusing me and it's forcing me to consider suicide. The AAT member Purnell and Kate Watson from CBA Legal, I think it is, who is a lawyer defending the government's already unbeatable decision to reject my work cover, further both reduced my prosperity by ruling my work cover not to be paid. They act outside the remit of the Charter of Human Rights of a person with a disability because I don't have legal representation, because I'm a scapegoat and because I'm framed. They are forcing it to go through on the 6th of the 4th, 2023, and that's illegal under the Charter of Human Rights for a person with a disability. It's a shameful effort by Kate Watson, government lawyer, who is an expert with the SRC Act, who is actually acting with impunity in order to victimise me, and member Purnell, and they're on first name basis with each other at Comcare and the AAT. Disgraceful effort. Disclosable conduct, member Purnell and Kate Watson. Danny Pearson, the workplace minister, refuses to respond to me. That's despite the legislation saying that if a work cover claim's liability cannot be determined, then it becomes a liability of the minister and or the agency, and it must be paid within 21 days. They are absolutely aware that this is the case, and they are absolutely aware of the legislation because I pointed it out to them. And he refuses to get back to me, and other people are complicit in this. So I got my lawyer, John Boyle, to demand that letter be responded to, but he will not intervene. I demanded Miranda Holt of GuideStar and Belinda Brady of IMA to demand that those responses get responded to. Everyone's too gutless to take on the government and the big boys at the expense of me, who's a vilified and identified and victimised person. You're all gutless. Danny Pearson, WorkSafe Minister, disclosable conduct for you. I actually sent an email to every single parliamentarian in the country, and none of them got back to me. If that's not a conspiracy to pervert the course of justice, I don't know what is. That's a vile victimisation of me and disclosable conduct of every public service official serving in the parliament. I'm a citizen of this country and a free citizen of this country, and I deserve to be acknowledged and not gaslighted and rejected and ostracised and set up to fail again and again, again and again, again and again. Disclosable conduct, every single parliamentarian in the Australian Parliament. Shocking effort. I sent my public interest disclosure to sia.lagos@federalcourt.gov.au. They have 14 days, or till next Tuesday, to legally acknowledge my public interest disclosure, and I'll be sending this to them as a reminder that they should do so immediately. I can't remember the name of the magistrate, but she was from Geelong, and my own child sexual abuse case, my VOCAT case, she cited as doomed to fail. That is an exact example of the psychometric profiling that I was under and the framing by Mr. Russell Ball, who framed me as an extortionist to the federal ombudsman, and I've never, ever been able to get a lawyer in my 49 years to get one of these issues over the line. It's been a disgraceful persecution of me. That Geelong magistrate, shameful public interest disclosure. James Browberg, or whatever his name is, from Micron 21. Thanks for destroying my website richmclean.com.au, and with it my digital identity, my email, my backups, my evidence, destroying evidence before a court, which is illegal, and for heinously victimising me and doing it with impunity. And thanks for no one for standing up for my business that was then heinously ruined. The Small Business Family Enterprise Ombudsman covered it up. The that's disclosable conduct right there. The Telecommunications Industry Ombudsman covered it up. Disclosures right there. My ABN was cancelled. Disclosures right there. Who is running this show? I can't suffer this existence my entire life. I've been violently beaten up twice. Once was at the Dancing Dog Hotel in Footscray, where I was hospitalised with broken bones and lacerations. And the VOCAT case for that was framed. It was me who was pinned as the principal aggressor, even though I was the one bloodied with my face split open with broken bones doing the police report after the affray occurred. It's a shocking example of how psychometric profiling happens and how I could lose a VOCAT case when it was so clearly caught on evidence that I was not the principal aggressor. And I actually even asked this for that evidence from the Police Freedom of Information, and they refused to give it to me. They refused to give me my own information. That's disclosable conduct right there of the police and the Freedom of Information Officer at the Victoria Police. I would have easily been let off the hook, and I would have easily got some compensation for the violence that occurred to me, but it was not to be. All those people and organisations, the police, VOCAT, the Dancing Dog, you all get a public disclosure nomination from me. Likewise, on another time, I was further re-traumatised by being put into the hospital where I'd actually died already and been revived. I was set up to fail, and I was violently beaten up by a government thug who was paid off to attack me inside a hospital. I ask you, how many of you out there have been going to the dentist and you're sitting in the chair getting health treatment and someone rushes up to you and breaks your nose? How many people would consider that an illogical and irrational and obnoxious thing to happen to you? I was receiving care in a hospital and I got the shit kicked out of me. I had to defend myself, and I will if I'm going to be put at risk. I'm a secular Buddhist and I'm a secular ethicist, and I would never be violent, and I hate the fact that I have had to be. But that is another cover-up. Another cover-up with the hospital where I'd already died, and then they took me back there only to isolate me, contain me, and then set me up to be beaten up by a government thug who was paid off. A disgraceful effort by Werribee Mercy Hospital, the Secret Service, and those people who set me up to fail, including Steve Isonides, who was also pivotal in getting me in there because I just asked for a settlement from his super to his lawyer. And his lawyer's another person of disclosable conduct. Thanks, victims of crime, for all this. You really helped me. Disclosable Conduct 101. All this abuse, and it wasn't mental illness, led me to want to kill myself. I attempted suicide in Werribee Mercy Hospital in February 2021, and there's now a cover-up from all concerned. The police, IBAC, the government, the hospital, about a possible settlement. It is a gross neglect and abandonment of duty of care. I did it with an agreed illegal contraband. They owed me a duty of care to keep me safe. I'm not an extortionist. I wanted to die. I was over the abuse, an abuse which has continued for over 2 years after I was revived from certain death. Disgraceful effort from all involved. I apparently suffer a cognitive brain impairment as a result of that fatal injury that I sustained when I was found with zero pulse and no blood. It's a disgraceful cover-up that could even occur, or it could even be allowed to happen, that I lived for 2 years on with no settlement, being financially abused, and they re-traumatised me by locking me up in the same place. It's a disgraceful effort by the hospital, and you can email Dr. Michael Lagrasso, who toes the party line to keep me in poverty. Disgraceful effort. I've been rejected my dexamphetamine script. I performed so well on that for many years, and Dr. David Horgan praised that treatment for me. And it was taken away from me about the time of my first suicide attempt, and it was never given back. And I self-medicate with street drugs. I have to remain clear-headed, because I can't think otherwise. It's a disgraceful malpractice from Dr. David Horgan and APRA, who cover his arse, and NHPOPC, who cover his arse, and IBAC, and the Victorian Inspectorate, and the Health Complaints Commissioner, and the Mental Health Complaints Commissioner. All those people can be put down as disclosable conduct of elongating my suffering and not getting me the medical care that I need. Australian Human Rights Commission totally ignore my emails detailing profound abuse and neglect and victimisation. Shock and effort. Finance Minister Birmingham's rejected my CDDC scheme payment, and so has the Office of Prime Minister and Cabinet. Shock and effort. The prior Attorney General, Michaelia Cash, did not intervene in my many emails that detail corruption at Australian Human Rights Commission, AFCA, and the Australian Human Rights Commission, and at AAT. Instead, she sends me to the SANE helpline when I specifically asked that I don't need welfare and I don't need someone to stick up for me. I need a political intervention. And you know what? Even SANE Australia refused to acknowledge my emails where I was once SANE Australia's Book of the Year. Thanks, SANE Australia. Barbara Hocking would be rolling in her grave. Disclosable conduct. Kate Watson defending the government's already unbeatable non-acknowledgement of my compensation. She acts outside the remit of the Charter of People with a Disability, and she is an obliteration on the legal fraternity and her public duties as a lawyer. Shameful effort. I can't believe everyone's acted with impunity to cover up what was deemed as a fatal self-inflicted injury inside a hospital from this intelligently designed vagrancy, which was intentional, it was malicious, it was systemic, and it's reflective of the psychometric profiling that I've suffered. That injury under a duty of care caused a cognitive impairment with no compensation. That's an appalling conspiracy to pervert the course of justice. That I was run over by a car, a government car, a thug's car, injuring my dog and I and causing me a permanent injury in my leg by an undercover government setup. That Ben Calder, the Ombudsman, covered up the abandonment of duty of care even though he admitted that it was with an agreed illegal contraband. That the government concealed my relationship with an ASIC employee, Stefan Isonides, who locked up his money in another statutory agency in ABN just before he left, just to cover his ass, just to protect his very sweet money. That the ASIC employee, Steve, had exploited me, a disabled person, and no settlement or separation of assets occurred, and he maliciously acted to imprison me in a psychiatric ward. That Steve admitted he was present at murders at Collingwood and Broome. Police failed to respond to my information. That's after 2 years of suffering workplace injury, I never received workers' compensation. This is despite legislation which states if no liability in 21 days, then the agency is liable and the minister. That the workplace minister, Danny Pearson, refuses to acknowledge this in my email. That a worker never to be paid insurance from HCF I was legitimately covered and insured for. Thanks, Sheena Jack. And then I was banned from contacting the insurance company HCF despite still paying the premium. You can't just ban someone from ever existing. That my 20-year-old richmclean.com.au website, which was also my ABN and my digital identity, be maliciously destroyed. And the Small Business Family Enterprise Ombudsman, Telecommunications Industry Ombudsman, and Business.gov, and additionally they protected Micron 21 and the impunity with which they destroyed my business and my thing that I'd worked so hard for over the years. That I wrote to the Australian Legal Bar asking why I've never had a lawyer and they refused to acknowledge me. That a psychiatrist, Dr. David Horgan, praised the use of a drug dexamphetamine and then prescribe it and then refused to prescribe it, neglecting me and abandoning me. That's malpractice. That Dr. Whittaker was negligent and Mr. Russell Ball, who informs government policy and advises the Ombudsman, silenced my evidence at the Health Complaints Commissioner, the Mental Health Complaints Commissioner, the Police, IBAC, the Victorian Inspectorate and the Commonwealth Ombudsman and NHPOPC and APRA. That's all disclosable conduct for all of those people and all the heads of those statutory agencies right there. I've been violently attacked and have my nose broken by another patient, a government thug injuring me inside a hospital. Nothing was done, anything about it. Tim Goss using his position of political privilege to delay, deny, defer my valid financial settlements. APRA Peter Dunstan rejected my whistleblower statement, citing I was not able to do so because I was not a registered person. And when I replied with my government login at the Department of Social Security, he ignored me. The bankruptcy people know full well that my former partner owes me a settlement and that I should have never had to go bankrupt, but they will not intervene or act. HCF Sheena Jack is complicit in my financial destruction and did so with impunity and fraud, and now I'm banned from contacting them. At IBAC, Sue is exceptionally aware of my abuse and does nothing about it, refusing my whistleblower statement and need for protections. And following this, I lost the entire contents of my home and was needlessly incarcerated, run over by a government car, and run out of my house by cops threatening me with the Mental Health Act. Literally run out of town. I was additionally beaten up inside a hospital once, and another violent assault in which I was hospitalised with broken bones and lacerations and never paid my victims of crime assistance. Comcare are complicit in the victimisation, with Paul Fowler rejecting my work cover. He's the old boss at WorkSafe and I was forced to Comcare in an elaborate setup to be rejected. AAT member Pennell and Kate Watson, a government lawyer, act outside their professional remit and in spite of Human Rights Charter enforce my hearings when they know I'm a scapegoat and can get no lawyer and they know it's doomed to fail and they can't act like that. It's against the law. Along with every other lawyer that framed me, the legal fraternity, especially the Australian Legal Bar, are complicit in following Russell Ball's instructions of never having my equitable representation. And all the large law firms have psychometrically profiled me and unanimously rejected me. AFCA, I'm banned. I'm a member of the public. You can't just ban a member of the public. Disclosable conduct right there. Australian Human Rights Commission, Liz Linsberg, lose another $1.5 million. APRA, they refused my whistleblower statements. The Office of Public Prosecutions have rejected my reporting of a reportable death of me inside a hospital and refused to acknowledge me. You couldn't make it up. Office of Public Prosecutions, boss, your disclosable conduct. Werribee Mercy Mental Health having further oppressed me and re-traumatised me by keeping me a political prisoner in the same location in which I suffered a fatal injury. Saltwater Clinic and Cade Mollison are supposed to care for me in the community, but I've only served to embolden my abuse and suffering and lock me away. I've only ever received two $50 vouchers for Coles and $100 Kmart voucher from Cade Mollison, a gutless pawn who is an apologist for the hospital's neglect and malpractice of me. NHP OPC, Prey McKenzie, disclosable conduct. She silenced my recording of evidence of malpractice and elongated my distress and not being acknowledged as a suicidal patient. The police, especially Footscray ones, elongate my abuse and oversaw the destruction of everything I own. The federal police have ignored my many reports of my treatment and my business being destroyed. The Maribyrnong Criminal Investigations Unit covered John Whittaker's ass in line with Russell Ball's framing of me. Justice Connect wouldn't help. IBAC reviews my whistleblower statement. The Victorian Ombudsman, Ben Calder, at first acknowledged my suicide attempt with an agreed illegal contraband and then acted to cover it up. Disclosure, disclosure, disclosure. Werribee Mercy Hospital is supposed to care for me, but care means a cup of tea and a hug, not locking you in a dark room with no stimulation, taking your freedom and keeping you a political prisoner, or overseeing the destruction of everything you own and covering up a heinous neglect and brain injury that happened on their watch under a duty of care. That's bullshit. That's a conspiracy to pervert the course of justice. That is disclosable conduct. I can't believe I'm saying this. Dean Stevenson is a hospital representative who still covers up my acquired brain injury and heinous neglect. I could go on. Centrelink, Dr. Moore, Dr. Whittaker, Dr. Cooper, David Horgan, Millennium Medical Centre, OAIC, Federal Police, VOCAT, Geelong Magistrates Court, AFCA, APRA, Australian Medical Review Board, Steve Icenides, and my family who have all allowed this to occur. I'm a lover, not a fighter, and I deserve a time where I can have my basic needs met, and that's all I'm asking for. You've simply got to acknowledge all these systemic, corrupt public disclosures and give me my whistleblower protection and finally get myself out of this victimization, a victimization that is going to kill me before my 50th birthday if nothing is done.